Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about Facebook because Facebook is deleting evidence of war crimes. Now, before we dive into the reporting from The Verge, it's just an excellent article. I want to say that I fully believe that Facebook does not condone war crimes. But here's what's going on, and I think this is actually a rather important topic that we're not really talking about. Now, the black market for looted goods is flourishing on Facebook. So, for example, on October 24th of this year, an art trafficker in Darna, Libya, posted a series of unusual ads. What he had for sale was a Greco-Roman statue, and essentially it was a marble bust that was covered in a toga. It looked like it belonged in a museum, because it did. Now, the seller basically posted photos of the piece in private Facebook groups dedicated to trafficking antiques. Now, while Facebook has banned the sale of historical artifacts in June, many of these posts are in Arabic, and Facebook simply lacks the expertise and Arabic speakers on their staff to properly enforce this new policy. And so a lot of this is simply flying under the radar. When Facebook is able to identify groups that essentially go past or don't follow these guidelines, experts are saying the company is simply deleting the Facebook group, which is then removing critical documentation for researchers that are studying the trafficking of stolen art. According to Katie Paul, who is the co-director of the Athar project that looks at this kind of stuff, and I quote, "This is critical evidence for repatriation efforts and war crimes. Facebook has created a problem, and rather than turning it into something they can contribute to, they are making it worse." Now, the implications go way beyond simple art theft. Since 2004, looted antiques have actually been a major funding source for terrorist organizations like ISIS. The Middle East is rich, obviously, with cultural artifacts, as they've got civilization going back thousands of years. And so the market for stolen goods is there, and it's not really regulated like drug trafficking and arms sales. And so this is obviously a huge, huge issue. Now, to go back to that seller of that Greco-Roman statue, that basically was in a group that had somewhere between 5 to 18,000 members. And remember, this is multiple groups ranging from 5 to 18,000 members. These traffickers then live stream their looting activities, giving each other tips on digging and finding, like how to dig these up, finding buyers for pieces that are still in the ground and all of that. And so Athar, that group I was talking about, is currently monitoring 130 groups dedicated to trafficking antiques, obviously trying to see if we can stop that. Now, there's also a group in Syria, a Facebook group with 340,000 members that has posts showing looters uncovering a mosaic, for example. In the comments, Athar documented one user saying that the mosaic shouldn't be removed, while another responded with laughing emojis saying, quote, "Die of hunger for the history of the country." So obviously a very serious problem. And this is a grave one in terms of active conflict zones where trafficking antiquities is considered a war crime. So this is obviously a huge, huge problem here. And to be fair, Facebook isn't the only platform that's struggling with how to police content while preserving evidence for research groups like Athar and ideally law enforcement. YouTube has also received criticism for removing extremist content that that basically researchers were trying to study. A lot of the extremist ones have moved on to different platforms, that claim 100% non-filtered, no censor, no fact-checking, put up whatever you want, no matter how crazy the conspiracy theory is, kind of sites out there. And so a lot of the researchers are migrating there, in that sense. And so both companies will try to preserve evidence at the request of law enforcement, but this policy really doesn't help academic researchers as well. And so in that vein, I think this is actually similar to problems that we in the cybersecurity field have with data breaches. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a situation after the breaches happen and the responding IT team or third-party IT company that the company contract has simply just wiped out all of the infected machines to get the network back up and running. But now it makes it harder for forensics to do their job. I think Facebook could come up with some way to register researchers like Athar here to say basically, okay, you're part of this group. And so as we, let's say, delete these Facebook groups from public, we are still going to give the researchers access to that history so that we can see these things unfold. The other problem that we have here is that because Facebook is one of those universal platforms that the world uses, if they are deleting, let's say, war crime art traffickers from the website, those people are going to be much harder to track, much harder to find. And while they may have a smaller buying audience, for this kind of stuff, it actually is doing a disservice to law enforcement. One of the better things that they might be able to do is work with international law enforcement agencies like Interpol to actively monitor these things. And as they are found, they start contacting intermediaries like the researchers at Athar or law enforcement to actually be able to track this and then start making arrests. It's a huge problem we have. And as I've mentioned, I don't think that Facebook is trying to interfere, with, let's say, the enforcement of the law, especially when it comes to war crimes. Facebook's not going to do that, but they are inadvertently, and I think that's a huge problem. And so that is your news of the day, and hopefully you haven't bought any black market pieces, from any one of these groups, because you may be committing a war crime and you may not know it. So that is your news of the day, and I hope everybody has a good weekend. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.